In this video we'll review a very important process for creating an image like this. And it's about the layout and the composition of the scene. So as I told in the previous video, this image didn't came out first with a sketch. So it was kind of a hybrid process between the 3D and then some corrections in post-production. I really thought that this would be a more free way of work, and I'm gonna tell you about how I started with this process. As I said before, it was very important. I was very aware of having as many references as I could. At the beginning I have two great options, or two very difficult options. One to have a vertical image or an horizontal image. So I had some doubts at the beginning, and well, I started to check out the images I had, just like this one. I really like both options, so I started checking the photographs, and just like this one, it's very close to what I was looking for. And especially this image looked very nice because of the fruits, how they were exposed, how the textures were so close, and lightning was so amazing. So it looked very nice. And also I found these kind of images which were also very interesting, very photographical, and the vertical aspect was very nice. I really had a lot of references, but in my mind I was were more fond to this vertical uh, image. And also I also thought that the horizontal image was very classical, so I was very driven to get to the vertical image. Here I have a very clear example of how would a warehouse would look in a vertical composition, and how it would look in a horizontal way. So scrubbing around these 5 images, I decided to go vertical. And also I realized that it would be simpler or easier to make this image work for a book or for a magazine being vertical. This format of course would take more space in a page, and would be better used in printed media. Well, once I decide the format and the orientation of the image I will be doing, I began with a very simple blocking of the scene. Let me show it to you. So I started with a very simple model of a warehouse, very close to this one, that it's very similar to all the warehouse I have. And I started working on a very simple scene that could give me the general area of the spaces of the scene. So I'm not gonna really explain how I model everything, because they are just boxes, planes, and some extruded shapes. I think there's not much sense of explaining it, because here we don't have any complex modeling. I didn't even try to make a photoreal model. Simply I was worried to make a block of the general scene. And well, maybe in this stage I overworked a little bit with this kind of details. But for some reason I really took a little bit of more time. I could make it even more simpler, but anyhow it works, and it helped me to define the space. It's very important to say that this scene, it's on scale. So I started with as close as real dimensions, so the renderer that I'll be using will work perfectly. The next step after creating a block scene that would contain most of the objects that will be final was to create a camera. And this is a very interesting process, so I'll tell you a little bit more about how I did it. So the first thing you have to do is to search for an angle, a right angle. So as I told you earlier, I was looking for a very high contrast in light and shadow. And also I wanted to take some lamps and some to play around with the lighting. So in the first stage, we have a very big entrance at the back. So I have most of my elements, warehouse, good entrance of light, and well, I had a vertical composition and a little bit of skew to the left or to the right. And so finally I decided to take it more to the right. More or less, I felt this was a very good angle, this side. So I created a camera, very simple to make it in 3dsmax. You just have the perspective view active and press Ctrl C. And there we have a camera. This camera mimics what we were looking at through the perspective view. And this is my view. So it's very, very alike to the one we had at the end. So the next step is to use it vertical, so we can do it two ways, to render like this and then crop in Photoshop, or make an actual crop scenes from Max. Let me show you how I did it. I'll open a more advanced scene now. Okay, as you can see now, this scene has already a camera. So now this camera works very well with vertical composition. At this point, we don't know if we have too much floor or too much ceiling, but this point is when we start working with most of the references we gathered before. Well, at this point, you can see that my predefined renderer is still Mental Ray. My original idea was to make it in Mental Ray because I've been using it for a long time. And more or less at half of the process on Lightning, I decided to change to V-Ray for many reasons. The first one is because here where I work at Exolo, we migrated to V-Ray. And I wanted to put in practice more of the things that we were developing for the renderer in the studio, so that's why I changed. And also, I noticed very high render times. The comparison with Mental Ray and V-Ray was important for the tests and everything. So that's also why I changed my render. Well, let's talk about now about the process of cropping the image from 3ds Max. We can have various workarounds, but at first I started with this size of the image. Here it's width and height, and with some parameters also of the camera. Combining it with the lens and the field of view, I have a final image. Be always sure to turn on the show save frame, so you can see the real aspect of the image in your viewport. Well, this combination of the size of the render, the field of view, and the lens will give us the final image, the final aspect for the image. Be very careful and explore this, because if you move some measurements like the height or the width of the image, you'll have it wider, of course. And if you feel that it got too wide, I can use the field of view and reframe my scene to where I want it. And sometimes this can get a little bit confused to manage correctly. So I'd like to recommend you the script I use for this. The script is called Overscan. You can find it online. It's a free plugin. It's very simple script, but it helps a lot to define these kind of things. So let me explain you a little bit. We'll try to make a change of size in the image. I'll make some tests here, and we have to be very aware of having the camera selected. So we need the camera selected and the viewport active. And take a look at these parameters over here. If I make some movements over here, so you can see that the image went white, but also you can see that these parameters change it too. This happens because the plugin tries to maintain the aspect of the image, so it's very simple to make to arrange again the framing of the scene. So this is a very useful plugin because it makes a lot of the work you have to do to change the values in the cameras, and it helped me a lot in this process. Now, once you feel good with the aspect in the camera and the aspect you'll be looking, I'll show you some of the next steps I did. So this is the next step I took in the blocking of my scene. So again, I model a very simple model of this canopy because I knew that part of the image was a first plane of a fruit stand, and mainly because it was the most clear idea I had for this image. So as I told you, the references are very important, and this idea came from one of the references. Let me look at it. Okay, this is the one. So in this image I really like the shades and how the chaos was coming around, and so I made almost a copy of it, more simple but very close to the reference. So at this point I already was doing some V-Ray testing, but we'll have a complete tutorial about it, so I won't elaborate a lot on this. I'll try just to explain very fast what I did here. So first, here we have a sun and a daylight system in V-Ray. And inside the warehouse I put a little light here to have a little bit more bouncing and see what's happening there. And I also added some textures, very simple textures on the ground and on the back, just merely just to see how things are coming out. Again, this is just pure blocking. But I just really wanted to see how the scene was coming out. Again, I'll say that I'll explain later how I made all the V-Ray setup for this scene. So I'll tell you that by now that I use this script that it's called SolidRock. Great script, by the way. In a nutshell, this helps you to get a very fast set presets for V-Ray with great results, and it's very simple to use. We'll see it later. So the first thing I did was to make a little render so I can then make some annotations over it and paint over it so I can take a better view of what the scene was going to. So I made a very simple and fast render. Let's see how much it takes. I'll render here so you can see it. So at this point I'm not looking for anti-alias, glossy reflections, huge illumination. I'm just trying to make a render so I can make annotations and take a look of how things are coming out in the image. For example, here it's a little bit dark, everything. And if I'm not wrong, it's because I took the secondary bounces too low. I'll put it again to 1 and see how it goes. I also added our teapot here, mainly to see how things were affected by light, some bounces and simple things, nothing fancy. So now with this render I can make annotations, I can start drawing over it, so I can start positioning things. So I'll take this render to Photoshop and start making some drawings over it. So these drawings, paint overs are called, and I always do it with my reference open, and so I can take things from them and incorporate it in the sketch. So again, I'll put them in my second monitor, and I'll start drawing some of the things that I think that could benefit this render, this simple render. So I'll mark out all the shapes and silhouettes that I think, well, the things that I like in this render. This is nothing very fancy, just a couple of lines to define the exact composition of the scene. I'm working here because I really like how this area looks like. So before I start putting elements here, I really would like to talk about how I make the compositions for my images. I'm not going to elaborate a lot, but I just want to share some tips here so that have been helping me a lot in my professional development. You can find a lot of things in internet, tutorials, books, and everything that talk a lot on the composition of an image. I would like to share this tutorial. You can find it on the internet. You can find it here. It's a great tutorial. It's not that long, and it gives you great tips about composition. I really recommend that you read it. You'll find very useful information here. So the first thing we're gonna cover is the thirds rule. It's very simple to apply. We have to divide the image in three parts: horizontal and vertical too. And the areas where the lines cross, like in here, 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 and here, we're gonna call it focal points. And these points is the areas where some elements will be very noticeable, or the composition will be very strong in the scene. So we'll take special attention on these ones because we're gonna put important things there, or we're gonna balance and play with them so each one draws a little bit of attention on the scene from each other. I'll take a little bit the opacity down for this layer so we can have it just like a reference there, like a guide. So I'll keep making here annotations, some things that I think that would go good, will be good in the scene. Again, nothing fancy. For example, here I'll put a table where all the things, all the fruits will be here. I always try to duplicate some of the things. For example, the table, I'll try to put it back there, mainly because to give a sense of size, of the size of the area. And also to see how things look farther or further away. Maybe I'll put more of these tables and things a little bit farther. Again, this is very simple. I'm not taking care of perspective or anything, just make some doodles to see how things will be arranged here. On this side, just to balance, I think I'll put some boxes here. Down here I'll try to put some other elements, little small tables, things like this. A little bit more boxes here and on the first plane, why not? A couple of boxes laying around here. So this will give me a great chance to see what's happening. For example, I think I need some more elements on this side, on the right side. And this is how precisely it came the idea to put here a card for moving stuff. Hey, we can have here very frontal in the first plane, with maybe with a box of fruits. Yeah, some things laying around here, some maybe a table down there. Yeah, we can put there on the background maybe some vases or boxes laying around, some chaos in the scene. Just free ideas here, just to make a little bit more interesting the image. Why not paint things over here? We have huge space, a lot of area, real estate here that we can use. I'll add some fruits hanging here from this part to break a little bit the huge plane here. And with these doodles, well, we see now what we have to do, what else we need to model, what props we need, and how much work we're going to put on this scene to make it look natural. So this was very interesting because I really started looking that I really have to model a lot, give me a great guide on how the things will look like, and how things, what I would need to do to make this scene look filled with stuff. And I realized that I have to model many elements so the scene can look filled, and that really scared me a lot. But with these kind of annotations, you really know where you're standing and what kind of things you have to model, and it gives us a great view of what we have to do. So now I'll show you a little bit how I started to add elements to my scene. So here they are. These were some of my first tests for lighting and how the warehouse was looking with different light situations. And in the progression you can see how I was adding elements and how I took them some in, some out, so I can see which were working and which were not. So here you can see the changes on the tables and the fruits and how they're positioned. And you can see how each time I get closer and closer to my initial sketch with my paint over, and you can see that well, it was a progression and things came each time a little bit more and more and more. Well, I hope this process of creating an image it's useful for you. It works for me. It's very intuitive for me, and see you in the next videos where we'll take a look at the modeling of the some of the pieces and lightning and shading and texturing and everything. Thank you very much.